Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm Brian Slagle, the CEO of Metal Blade Records, home to bands like King Diamond, Amon Amarth, Fates Warning, Lizzie Borden, Cannibal Corpse, and Slayer, and the band we're going to talk about today, Metallica. We have a new sponsor here at 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. It's the Metal Blade Museum and Store. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada, right near the Strip. We have a ton of stuff in there from 43 years of Metal Blade. We've got Metallica stuff, we've got Slayer stuff, we've got Gwar, we've got Lizzie Borden. We've got tons and tons of stuff in there. We've got vinyl that you can look at for old stuff. We've got a ton of artifacts. We also have a lot of metal bands, too, that Metal Blade has worked with, like Deep Purple and Alice Cooper and Stars and Guns N' Roses and Thin Lizzy. So there's a lot of great artifacts there. It really is the ultimate heavy metal museum. And recently, we also have moved our Metal Blade retail store into the museum. So that's in the first part. When you first walk in, the store is there. Free to get into the store. You got to pay to get into the museum. But for more information, go to metalblade.com/museum. I wanted to do something a little bit different here because we've kind of been ignoring, I wouldn't say ignoring, but we haven't talked a lot about songs that define heavy metal and things, in my opinion, that were big influences that made it what it is today. But I did want to talk about a newer Metallica song because here we are, one of the biggest bands in the world, and the last couple of records have been super heavy, especially this song, which I love, called Spit Out the Bone. So we're going to talk about something a little bit newer here. We're going to go back and talk to our good friend, Mr. Chris Santos, who's a huge Metallica fan. You know him from talking about One before on the podcast. And we're going to bring in Metallica's producer, Greg Fidleman, to talk about the production. So I'm really excited about that. But as always, we're going to begin north of the border with Mr. Martin Popoff.
All right, Metallica Spit Out the Bone. Yeah, very cool to get a song like this, a very utilitarian song, a very easy drinking, easy to like song, way up at the end of the Hardwired to Self-Destruct album, which came out November 18th, 2016. But yeah, this is a fast, thrashy song, but it is very melodic, quite simple, so it's almost like thrashy punk or hardcore punk in a way as well. It was the first song recorded for the album, but it's the last song released as a single, fifth single. So they did 5 singles off of this. It was released as a single November 14th, 2017. So a year later, they made a video for it. The city of Madeira, or Matera, sorry, from Italy is in the video of this song. But yeah, very cool song, way up at the end of this Greg Fidleman produced album. We're really starting to get the Metallica sound. I think it really does solidify on Death Magnetic, and we really get it on 72 Seasons as well. This very strong Greg Fidleman personality to it. You especially hear it in the drums. It's got very, very punchy Vinnie Paul-esque bass drums on it, and just very bright recording all around. But yeah, it's definitely a really cool song. It was the first song recorded for the album, like I say. I think Robert was saying that he wasn't happy with his bass parts, so he fixed them quite late in the process. But there is a really cool bass break in here too, where he's doing some really kind of Lemmy kind of bass in here. Of course, at 7 minutes long, there's going to be some variation, but they really do stick to the theme for quite a while on this and stick to this speed as well. But of course, we're going to get those halftime parts. We're going to get some modulation as well. We're going to get a wah-wah solo from Kirk. But yeah, this is a really likable song, really late in the album, and it really speaks to the fact that this album is super strong throughout. I think a lot of deep Metallica fans are really picking this one out from the last 3, which are all fairly similar to each other, I'd say. And like I say, this is where you really get a Metallica sound for the very first time, as far as I'm concerned, where they really stick to a sound for a fair amount of time. Obviously, a long, long time, because this is over a lot of years. The only other time I really think they have a sound is on Load and Reload. And other than that, they've been very adventuresome with moving around with the productions and the kinds of music that they're going to make. But I think these last 3 albums are kind of a trilogy, and a lot of people are calling this the best one. So there you go. Spit Out the Bone from Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
Thanks, Martin. Really cool. And as you know, Martin has written 150 books about hard rock and heavy metal, so he does know his stuff.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Right now, we welcome a new guest to the podcast. You know him from his work with Black Sabbath, Slipknot, High on Fire, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Slayer, Audioslave, Lizzie Borden, and many, many more. Mr. Greg Fidleman, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this. So tell me when you first got to work with Metallica and how that whole thing happened.
That whole thing sort of comes out of when I was working with Rick Rubin, doing a bunch of records with him for a long time. He started working with the guys, and I sort of got the, I drew the short straw. I got the Metallica gig, and so that's how I got in the in the very beginning, yeah. Which is oddly a very long time ago now, but yeah.
I know, right? That was Death Magnetic, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I went to a premiere of the Through the Never movie that Metallica did.
Right.
And I was just blown away by how the sound was. Like, they sounded incredible. I was like, what? This is incredible. So the first person I saw after was James, and I go, whoever did the engineering and mixing of this should be your next producer forever, because it sounds amazing. And he laughed and said, yeah, that's probably going to be the case.
Awesome. Man.
And to further fluff up your ego a little bit, when I saw James in Phoenix on the last run when they were in Phoenix, I was just talking about the new record and how amazing it was. And I said, it sounds incredible. And he's like, oh yeah, Greg's not going anywhere. We're giving him more work now even. So I mean, honestly, I think these records, especially the last two, are probably two of the best sounding Metallica records ever.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. That's a tall order there, but it's been great.
So we're talking about Spit Out the Bone today, and normally on this podcast, we're kind of talking about the older stuff and, things that influenced the bands and everything. But I wanted to do something newer because I felt, I don't want to overlook new stuff, because there's still a lot of new stuff coming out that's really good that I think fits in with the songs that define heavy metal. And this one, to me,
right,
it's probably in my top 15 Metallica songs of all time. And when it came out, it was like the perfect song. Like everything, the riffs are great, the leads are great, vocals are awesome, the lyrics are really interesting, and it's kind of like the perfect song. And for these guys, what I think is really interesting is, here's a band that's one of the biggest bands in the world. And a lot of times bands don't revisit where they came from and musically. A lot of bands move on, but here's Metallica doing this, and this record in particular Death Magnetic led up to it, but this record in particular, in this song, is a very old school Metallica song and record.
Definitely, yeah. And you mentioned something about the revisiting thing. It's like this song morphed from the beginning of the recording process till the end more than most of the other songs did. But this song it like pushes all the buttons, right? It does have a lot of parts, but when you listen to it, I remember we were trying to shorten some of the songs. We're like, maybe we should take this, let's trim the fat. And you get into this song, and it's like, this is like the longest song, but it's like, you could never, like, if you take this part out, someone's upset. So it's like none of it really felt like it. I don't want that to go away, because the 15-year-old me, if that person knew that you took that out, I'd be fucking pissed, right? So and it's got, it's the fast stuff. The middle section of that song in particular, it's still to this day. I remember even during the time when we were making it, it's like, once it gets through like the verse, chorus, it gets in the middle part. And the middle part has a lot of different sections, and it gets into the sort of melodic thing, and there's like a melodic vocal bridge, and then the guitar kind of picks it up. Then it goes fucking crazy, slow, dirty, that part still, I think, if I'm not expecting it, will give me goosebumps every time. It's like, whatever that is, I don't know what it is, but I know it has existed for a long time. When I was, a 15-year-old kid listening to heavy metal records, I'm sure you can relate to this. It's like stuff would just like push a button that you didn't even know you had, and you wanted to just keep listening to it, and you wanted to keep finding more stuff that pushed that button. That song is chock full of that kind of stuff. I love it.
I remember when I first heard the album, I loved the record from the first time I heard it. And it's such a great record. It's a little long. You know, there's a couple things on side 2 that are what they are. But then this song comes in. It's like this great record. And all of a sudden the end. And it's very similar to the way Metallica ended records, you know, in the 80s as well, with that kind of fast banger song at the end. And then this song comes on. I'm like, whoa. What is this? I think I listened to it like 7 or 8 times in a row. I was like, this is so incredible.
I know what you mean as far as like the classic Metallica records. Their last song always was sort of what most bands sort of do for the first song of the record. Like Metallica always sort of did for the last song, like no apologies at the end, man. It always ended with just all you wanted to do is flip it and drop the needle again and listen to the whole thing over again, right? It's pretty good. It's a good way of doing it.
Exactly. And so Metallica's always sounded so great live. I mean, partly, I'm sure, because the band sounds good for the first of all, and then of course Big Mick and they've, you know, now they're new sound guys. I mean, they still sound amazing.
Right.
But what you were able to do, and I think this is really important because it's difficult for producers to do this, to make the band sound like they do live on a record. And that's an art, because I've heard so many bands live. They go, oh, they're so great, but the record just isn't quite there. And you've been able to do that on these last couple of records. Like, what's the trick to that, if there is one?
I mean, I don't know if there's a trick, but you definitely are tapping into something. I mean, if anybody knows what you're talking about, without getting too much into my background, it's me. You know, it's like being a young musician and having what I thought was a killer band, and then getting the amazing opportunity to make a record, and then you make a record, and even you're just like, well, fuck, that doesn't sound the way it was supposed to sound like. But at that time, you know, you don't, especially then, you know, musicians especially had, you know, the studio was like a fairy tale. Like, you didn't even know how anything worked or how anything was done. Or right now, it's like every young musician knows how to make a record pretty much. But so it's always been in my DNA of like the stuff that gets me excited is always the stuff that captures that element. Again, it's one of those things, like, I don't know what it is exactly, but I recognize it when I hear it. And I also recognize it when it's not there. It just sounds flat, or you took it too far, or that's, you know, a common thing. And also it requires the artist to also sort of be on the same page. So I know lots of times, and this goes back even to days working with Rick and stuff, we used to always have a thing. It was like, go listen to the tracking, rough mix of the tracking. Like, go. How did this first sound before we sat here and wrenched on it for 3 months? Like, why is this, okay, sonically, maybe it's not as good, or it's not as polished, and something's out of tune, or whatever it is. Why is the spirit not there anymore? And the guys in Metallica definitely hear that too. And, you know, Lars is, historically everyone knows, you know, Lars likes to have his finger in all the pies, and he also is very especially on these records. Obviously, I don't know what it was like to work with him, you know, in the 80s and 90s, but it was always kind of like, yeah, that sounds right, and it sounds like it's been produced, but it's not as moving as it used to be, or whatever. And you sort of have to sometimes unravel stuff. And my mantra is always, you work as hard as you can and you chase every idea that you have, but you cannot be married to the process. You have to be able to listen objectively afterwards, because when you work really hard on something, it's hard to be like, you know what? I championed that idea and I went for it and I worked a week on it and I convinced everybody to do it, but you know what? It's not good. and unravel it, you know, and you have to be able to do that.
Yeah. And it's good that they've gotten to that point, because, you know, I was around a lot when they were making some of the not so great sounding records. And it's interesting that they've kind of come back around to that, to where, because, you know, I mean, it's just so weird that, again, one of the biggest bands in the world has had several albums that are really good that still have questionable parts of the production, but they clearly have learned since then, obviously. And but it's good to hear that. I mean, they're all the thing that I still always love about all those guys is they're still first and foremost fans.
Yep.
And they still love the music. They still love the old music. Like when I get together with Lars, we ended up invariably talking about, new British heavy metal or something. And we revert back to being 16 and 18-year-old kids when we're, in one of our bedrooms listening to all this stuff. So I think that remains a big part why, too. They're still so hungry and still creating so much great art. I remember that I was watching them on Howard Stern, and Howard goes like, look, you guys can tour for the rest of your lives. You all have tons of money. Like, you don't have to make new records or new music. Why do you do that? And I think it was James that said, well, we're artists. We make art, and that's what we do. So we're going to continue to make art. And thankfully, they're continuing to make art at a very high level.
That's a great way to look at it. And what James says there is totally true. It's like, I know sometimes I'll read about other new bands that have been around for 30, 40 years. There's not many of them, obviously. And it's like, oh, what's the point of making a new record? And it's like, what's the point of making a new record? You're a recording artist. That's what it's in the description of what you do. I mean, you have to record music and release it. And if you don't have to sell 10 million records for it to still be, a worthy adventure, it's like, if you don't have that creative side of you outputting stuff, I think it's just not right. And they certainly are game for it. And, you mentioned again, the 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that you sort of revert to. These guys are totally that. It's almost funny at times. You could put on working on something and maybe it's not going great and the vibe's starting to tilt funny, and put on British Steel, and in 2 minutes, everyone's in a happy mood, and it's fog. I remember this part. Oh my God, there's that one middle section is amazing, or whatever it is, Riot or whatever, some weird record from the old days. And I have the same thing, and I know you do too. It's like you could still tap into that really youthful excitement. It's still fun, and you don't know what else to do but keep doing it,
100%. So you mentioned you were a musician first in your band, by the way, a band that I loved and was amazing. Where was the transition to go from being a musician to being an engineer and ultimately a producer?
Well, I think the early days of my stuff, I always was like the guy in the band that would try to make a demo or record rehearsals or whatever. So that was always kind of my thing anyways. But the whole process of getting to make a record, and we were lucky enough. We worked with Brendan O'Brien on this first record that we're talking about, and he was a bit of an eye-opener for me. You don't know anything about anything, right? You don't even know what a producer really is when you're at that time, when you're even have a record deal. You're so, well, okay, what does a producer do? I don't even know, And it was just an eye-opener to see somebody who knew how to work all this crazy equipment and get stuff, recorded and play back and operate all this crazy machinery. And then he could pick up a guitar and say, hey, you're playing this part here. It's like, what if you played it like this? And he's a great guitar player. And it was kind of like, bing, oh, okay. It's not this or that. It could be this and that. And that sort of opened my eyes. And then it was, a frustrating handful of years there for us trying to, navigate the record business. And the more we did, the more I asked questions, and the more I started learning. And after the second record that we did with Terry Manning, which is again a super generous guy with his knowledge, I sort of thought it'd be fun to try to do stuff like that. And then a couple of years later, when just things really weren't going well for us, it's sort of like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm like, I got to take a shot at this and try to figure out how to make it happen. And I just, pulled the plug on everything and got a job as a runner luckily at Sound City. So that was a nice spot to be at. And I just kind of went from there, and I never really looked back, and I love it. It's great. And I still play guitar, and I still buy guitars for some crazy reason, but it felt pretty much like a natural progression. It took a long time to learn the ropes, and working in the early days of Sound City, I started at Sound City, I think in 95. Most of the things that came in and out of Sound City were rock, and all of it's all analog place for sure. That's all that was happening there. Digital recording obviously was happening then, and Pro Tools was sort of starting to be some part of people's record making, but not there. And then a friend of mine, there was also an engineer that sort of had a Pro Tools rig, and I kind of was watching what he was doing, and I was kind of like, knew nothing about it. And I was like, this seems like pretty cool, and this is not going anywhere. So I decided to learn how to do that, and then I sort of became the guy who knew how to do all the analog stuff and also could operate a Pro Tools system or whatever, and it just kind of kind of went from there. Sort of how I sort of latched started getting a lot of jobs with Rick because we started bringing Pro Tools rigs in for editing and stuff, but yet I still could, track a band or whatever, so it sort of just kind of rolled out from there.
That's amazing. Did you do any schooling or go to school for any of this, or did you just learn on the job, basically?
I was a school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
I just learned, I think I'm probably just naturally somewhat of a technical head, which helped, but you could teach yourself this stuff.
Am I correct in that you are now also, Metallica records every show they do and they offer it up for the fans to buy? Are you now, I understand you're now producing or mixing that stuff as well.
Yeah, I sort of, I'm not mixing all of every show. I sort of have a team of specialists. It's really them. They're doing all the heavy lifting. But I sort of, we kind of came up with this idea, or Lars, I think, came up with this idea right after Hardwired. Is like, hey, do you think we could do this? We'll kind of step up make these things sound a little bit better and kind of up the quality of everything. And he knew I had a couple of engineers that I worked with. And so we sort of came up with this idea. It took us a little while to figure out how to do it quick enough for it to make sense for everybody. And we've been kind of doing it ever since. I've got depends on who's available and who's not, but got three people, myself and Sarah, my engineer, that's been with me since Death Magnetic. So depending on when the show is and who's available, and send this guy that, and you do this stuff, I'll do that, and it works great. We are able to turn around pretty quick, and I think it sounds, it's a good, cool representation of the shows. It keeps everyone busy. Yeah.
And if you guys don't know, Metallica for years has been recording every show they ever have done, and now and afterwards they offer it up. They get it all mixed up and ready to go, like a professional recording, and they offer it to fans to buy it. So if you went to a show, you want to take it home with you instead of using your phone or something, you just get the whole audio thing. It's a pretty cool idea. And I mean, I started out as a bootlegger, so and infamously, Metallica would invite people, bootleggers, like, come record our shows. We don't care. And now they've bumped it all the way up to this, which I think is really great. And then I don't know of any other band that really does this. I mean, some bands like Pearl Jam and some of the guys put out a lot of live stuff, but Metallica, like, if any show you want, like, I heard that show is good, you can go up on their website and buy it. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I remember the bootleg days, and I remember when, this is a long time ago now, but when they started doing just bring your cameras and bring your tape recorders, and it was like, usually it's like, if they catch you trying to get into a concert with that stuff, they take it away or throw you out, right? And these guys were like, no, we got a special area for you right over here. It was pretty rad. And that's sort of, whatever that mentality was, is still there. They're happy.
Well, I was a bootlegger as a teenager, so I always embraced that. I thought that was pretty cool. But
yeah, pretty fun.
Anyway, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. It was awesome. And thanks again.
Oh, sure, man. It's always good to talk to you.
And now we welcome in a previous guest on this podcast. You know him from his many television appearances, including being a judge on Chopped, also his record label that he has as well, and his restaurants, Beauty and Essex and Stanton Social, and many more. And he recently won an award, a Polestar Award, no less, for his collaboration with Metallica on a hamburger, which is pretty metal. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good.
You're too humble. You should have said his record label, Blacklight Media Records, which you co-created with me.
Well, you created, but yes, Blacklight Media Records, very important. I figured it would have come up sometime in our conversation.
Yeah.
So the last time we had you on, we talked Metallica. And that's one of our most popular podcasts. So I figure we should run it back and do that again, since it did so well the first time. You're the resident expert on Metallica here on the 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal podcast.
Amazing. Love it. I love it.
But this time I want to do something a little bit different. And I wanted to talk about something newer. We haven't really talked about any newer songs yet on this podcast. And I don't want to completely ignore if there's a lot of great music being played now, especially by big bands like Metallica. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Hardwired came out, I love that record. I thought, I was like, wow, this is really the return to their roots that they tried on Death Magnetic, but didn't quite get it done the right way, I think. Mm-hmm. Although it's still a really great record. But this one I thought was just a perfect record. And this song that we're going to talk about today, that Spit Out the Bone, ends the record. And it's probably right now in my top 10, certainly top 15 Metallica songs ever. It's like just the perfect song. It's super heavy. The subject matter is great. All the rhythms and melodies, the leads, like everything about this song there aren't very many perfect metal songs, but this, I would venture to say, is pretty close to one.
Yeah, I mean, so for starters, Hardwired is, and we've talked about this privately, like Hardwired is, I put that record up there with anything they've done. I mean, it's hard to really Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master, and even Injustice. Like that's among the greatest, if not the greatest, first 3 or 4 records that anyone's ever put out ever. And then they kind of did a whole bunch of other stuff. And then Hardwired came out, and they really brought back the best that they could be. And that record, to me, also, when we talk about 3 or 4 things, like the first 3 or 4 songs on Hardwired, I think measure up to almost anything they've done. I mean, it's just that record's relentless at the beginning, and then the pace kind of slows a little bit, and then it almost, the Spit Out the Bone almost catches you by surprise at the end, because it's a really, really vicious track that really harkens back to, I would say probably harkens back mostly to, somewhere in between Master and Injustice, because it's technical, but it's the last song on the record, but it feels like it could have opened the record. And if I'm correct, I think when they did the Hardwired tour, they actually opened the show with Spit Out the Bone on many occasions.
Oh, they did. I didn't know that, actually. It was funny because when they did that tour, I love that song. I think the record's great, and you're right. The first side, basically side 1, if you go that way. I mean, that whole side, like every song is pretty spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
But this one kind of goes back to the early days where they finished with a really fast, heavy song. I love that song. So I texted Lars, I think the first or second time I saw them on that tour. And I said, hey, I'm coming to see you guys in a week or 2 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, I'm putting in my request right now for Spit Out the Bone, because they'll let me pick songs here and there, and then they're very nice about playing them most of the time. But he laughed. And he said, yeah, we're not quite up to speed on that one yet. In fact, he said one of his kids was like, how are you going to play that live? Because there's a lot going on in that song. And, Lars, as great a drummer as he is, not the spring chicken, but he was able to obviously do it, which is no surprise. And it took them a minute to get there. I also think that there were so many bigger hits on that record that this is kind of a bit of a deep track, but it's become one of the more popular songs on that record.
Something that I learned along the way is that they view that more, and it's weird because I think it would do great, on their current tour, which is obviously all stadiums. But I read Lars had said somewhere along the way that they felt that this song was an arena song and not a stadium song, which is really interesting to me. It's a very precise, very technical song in a way. It kind of has a lot of the Metallica hallmarks, with the riffing as the song goes along. It's kind of a journey. There's so many things about the song that it's 7 minutes, which is I guess fairly standard for a Metallica song.
That's a short one.
Yeah, right. I'm a big fan of 72 Seasons. I will be honest, I wasn't sure how I felt about the record until I started going to 72 Seasons shows, and hearing the 72 Seasons tracks live kind of really opened the record up for me. And now I love that record. But some of the songs, I do feel like they maybe could have been trimmed up maybe a little bit. And they're still great songs, don't get me wrong. But this song is, for 7 minutes, feels lean and mean and the right length. You know what I mean? It doesn't meander, It doesn't go too far, doesn't outlast its welcome. And there's just so much going on. Like, James's vocal delivery is so powerful, yet still melodic. But I think it has some viciousness to it. The production of this song, I feel like, is amazing. Like, the bass is nice and thick, and the snare is sharp, but it's snappy. It's some of the best production. The whole record is some of the best production I think Metallica's ever gotten, or ever achieved. And I know they kind of did the record sort of themselves with a producer at their headquarters, right?
Yep.
And there's even, then they sneak a bass solo in there, a small Rob bass solo in there. Rob gets a chance to do some serious vocalization. There's just so much going on, and while Kirk's kind of solos sound like Kirk solos, they're very trademark Kirk sounding. I also read at some point that all the solos he did on Hardwired, he kind of improvised in the studio, except for this one, because this song is so precise. He actually really wrote this solo out specifically. I don't know that you would know that by listening to it, because it just sounds like a Kirk solo, but it's got that swing and that groove, and then all the at the end.
can definitely see that because that solo is so good and so melodic. It sounded to me like something he would have written out. Like all the other solos, exactly, you could kind of tell. But this one felt like it was written out beforehand.
And there's some sneaky technical drumming. Lars. Lars. We've talked about this before too. Lars kind of gets some stick from people. People don't appreciate, and he's not the most technical drummer that ever lived, but he's really does some very creative things within the bandwidth that he has. And there's a part in this song where he does this kind of like off rhythm cymbal and snare hit that it's really subtle, but it's really cool.
One of the many things I like about the song, and we can certainly dissect it a bit, is the transitions. And transitions, especially in metal, for me, is always a big thing. And I look back at, and we had Dave Lombardo on this podcast talking about that, and you can go back and listen to that after you finish listening to this episode, please. But we talked about Dave and the transitions, because he makes these seamless transitions of where you're going from, the song's going from one part to a completely different part, but it works so well together. And this song, there's a couple of those changes where it's like, there's one part where it's like, there's a whole kind of progressive little thing, and they go back into the main riff, and it kind of goes, like it switches in a split second where it's like, whoa, that was, right. But it works so well. I was like, wow, that was amazing how they made that transition from that one part to the other part. And it just works so perfectly. And that, like I said, I love things like that, especially in metal.
It just feels so fresh, and it's funny because, when you asked me to come on and do this with you today, I kind of revisited the record and that song. And I love that. I listened to that record quite a bit, but it's like, oh my God, that's almost 10 years ago. Like, I know. It's crazy, right?
I don't like to hear that.
But, you think about that record and that song and the first few songs, like that song, Spit Out the Bone, could have been, I think it could have fit on Master, or probably it feels more like an And Justice song. However, I'm glad it wasn't on And Justice, because I think it's the production on this one is nice, meaty, and does the song a lot of justice. No pun intended. But it just feels like a song that could have been written by earlier day Metallica, and it's great to see. And they've done this with a few tracks on 72 Seasons as well. It's great to see that they can still dive in. You and I were at one of the 72 Season shows, and we were backstage saying hello to the guys, and I remember James saying to you specifically, like, that he was grateful that the riffs still keep coming to him even at this stage in his career. And this song is a perfect example. I mean, the main riff is a great riff that is it's Metallica even if you didn't know it was Metallica. Only Metallica could write that kind of a riff.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't think I know that's one of the reasons why I chose it, because it shows one of the biggest bands of the world went back to their roots and made a record that easily could have come out in 1985, 86, 87. And I kind of knew that was going to happen a little bit, because right before Death Magnetic, I guess when they were starting to write it, Lars hit me up and said, hey, can you send me and James a copy of the compilation album that we did? Because we did this 1979 New Wave of British Heavy Metal compilation that Lars actually put together, and we released it in North America. It was very nice of him to ask us to do that. So they wanted to go back and kind of revisit where they came from. It's Iron Maiden and Diamond Head and Def Leppard and, Saxon, everybody from, that was the New Wave of British Heavy Metal that all of us grew up on and had a huge influence on all of us. And they wanted to go back and kind of listen to that again and get some fresh ideas. And Death Magnetic came out again, and that was in the right direction, certainly more like old school Metallica. But this record, I think, just completely nailed it. And specifically this song is just such a great song. Like you mentioned, the riffs are amazing, the leads are great, the melodies and hook lines throughout the song, whether it's the guitars or the drums or the bass or the vocals, they all just kind of work together perfectly. And that doesn't happen a lot of times. And that's a very dangerous song for me to play when I'm driving a car. Because I was moving to Vegas right when that came out. So I was kind of going back and forth a lot. And I remember a few times that song would come on, and I would look down, and I'm going, I'm going like 90 some odd miles an hour. I should probably slow down a little bit.
Right. Well, as you know, your listeners obviously, or whoever's listening to this doesn't know, but I lived in New York City for almost 30 years, and I actually been in LA for 5 years. But when I was in New York, I let my license lapse, so I haven't had a driver's license in a long time. But nonetheless, I bought a 1970 Chevelle 4 years ago, spent the last 4 years restoring it. I finally got my license a couple of months ago, and I've been going out and I've been listening to Metallica exclusively in the Chevelle. And when you asked me to do this, you sure know I got in that Chevelle and I started driving up and down the 101, listening to this song and that record. And yeah, I found myself with the pedal down as far as it would go. So I totally get it.
Which is rare on the 101 freeway, by the way. So
well,
was that like if 4 in the morning or something?
Go at the right time, you'll be okay. Another thing about this song is lyrically, I feel like it's a departure from what James typically will write or the band will typically write, right?
The lyrics are brilliant, though.
When you think about songs like Unforgiven or some of the stuff on 72 Seasons, it feels a little more based in, I don't want to say human emotion, but human emotion, things that people go through. Yeah. This is totally about futuristic society and Terminator type stuff and well, you know what, everything that's happening right now, right, with AI, we're all freaked out. Like
100%.
It feels like a cautionary tale almost, the lyrics to this song.
Yeah, and that's why I think they're brilliant, because he's spot on. I mean, he's talking about machines taking over the world, and that we're seeing that now, like you said, with AI and all these robots. I mean, here in Vegas, robots are taking over the casino industry, where people who used to serve you drinks or make the drinks are not they're robots making the drinks now, and pretty soon there'll be robots serving you the drinks. But it's a really interesting when you break down the lyrics and read about it. It's basically the time when the robots and the machines take over and get rid of man. Hence the Spit Out the Bone title, which is just great. When I first heard the lyrics, I was kind of like, that's different. And then more listening to the song more and really getting into the lyrics, I was like, wow, this is, and like you said, this is like 10 years ago. So, and we're seeing how smart he was about what was happening, that he saw what was going to happen, which again is just a really brilliant thing. And to go on a wider path with James and lyrics, you go back to, the early albums, that was, Anger and Misery and, all this really stuff. Then it kind of, moved around, and the last like 3 or 4 records have been very much, especially 72 Seasons, obviously, which I don't want to say it's a concept record, but it kind of is, based on what he went through and his whole thing. But it's really interesting how he's evolved as a songwriter lyrically from where they first were to where they are now. It still all works, and the subject matter is varying and certainly different, but it still all really works. And it just shows you, again, how talented that guy is.
Mm-hmm. And he's right, because this is not going to end well for us.
No. Thankfully, we'll all be gone by then, but we won't see the tapes, hopefully. But
one thing I have to be better at is watching videos. I don't typically, I listen to music every waking moment of the day, as long as if I'm not in a meeting or so, if I have a chance to be listening to music, I'm listening to music, is my point. But I don't usually take the time to sit and watch videos. So when you asked me to do this with you and then talk about this song specifically, I actually looked up the official music video, which I had never seen before. I'm going to be completely honest. And it's a little cartoony. It's a little bit like comic booky in a way. But I was thinking about these rumors that they might be going and doing a Sphere residency at some point. And watching that video, I was like, oh my God, like this video or some variation of this video with these like cyborgs, attacking and killing people and lighting civilizations on fire and everything else. Like, how amazing would that play at the Sphere?
From your mouth to Metallica's ears, please.
Do you think they have another record in them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just know from Greg, because I'm trying to get him to do a couple things, that he's super busy. And I can't imagine that it's only on the live shows. So I would imagine.
I mean, it's not that I don't think that they have the creativity to do it. I'm just thinking more of, they've been on this tour for so long. I don't think it's quite over yet. Then there's rumors that they might do the Super Bowl, and then that would springboard into the fall 2026 Sphere thing. Like, when do they have time to even get into to write? You know what I mean? Unless they're writing all the time.
Well, they only do 50 shows a year. I mean, it seems like they do more, but there's only 50. I think James only does 50 shows a year. So, but it's spread out over time, obviously. So they definitely, I mean, when they made 72 seasons, I was kind of surprised that it came. I mean, it wasn't that fast, but it came, fast enough, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sure. I haven't asked them, but I'm sure they're doing more stuff for sure. And there's time. Like I said, they love being in the studio. They love creating music. I'm sure they've got, and even, as you mentioned earlier, talking to James about the riffs, he goes, yeah, they keep coming. So I'm sure he's got hours and hours of great riffs still.
And then what do you think? Do you think that there's a chance that they'll get the Super Bowl nod since it's San Francisco 2026?
Well, here's the thing. So that's a really good question, because I've talked to not only the band about this, but a lot of other people about it as well. And that's one thing that they absolutely want to do. It's like I mentioned, their bucket list. That's on their bucket list. Problem is, basically, the guy that's booking the Super Bowl is Jay-Z, and he's not a rock guy. Even though his company's named Rock Nation.
All they need to do is just do 1 year of rock, and then they can go back to 10 or 15 years of what they've been doing all along.
I know. Look, I agree, and I think I tweeted out a couple of years ago watching the Super Bowl that how ridiculous it is that Metallica has not played it. When you go to every single football game, you'll hear 4 or 5 Metallica songs. I think I went to a Raider game. They played 9.
And AC/DC, listen, you know I'm not the biggest AC/DC fan in the world, and I'm also not the biggest Guns N' Roses fan in the world, but they're still alive, they're still kicking, but they have a limited window. So if you're going to do a thing where there's Metallica with special guests, you would think it would be AC/DC, Guns, bands like that. The time to do it is right now. You can't wait anymore.
I agree 1,000%. The other problem, though, is that, and they could change this, I wish they would, but the Super Bowl makes you tape everything.
Yes.
And if you watch the artist, some stuff is live, some stuff is tape, but they want you to tape everything. And they're thinking, well, just in case something happens.
I think it's understandable.
Yeah, but it's like those guys are not going to do that. They're going to go out and play live because they can, and it would be amazing. And if their crew is allowed to be in charge of everything, there won't be any issues. Because the famous thing when they had Gaga at the Grammys, there was the mic got unplugged, and they played a show that night at the Hollywood Palladium, and I asked their sound guy that night, I said, what happened? He said, yeah, it wasn't us. It was a local crew that was doing it, and some idiot dancer on stage stepped on a cord and unplugged the vocal mic, James, and they could never figure out how to get it back on. I said, if we were doing it, that wouldn't happen. So there's some technical issues there as well. But I do know they want to do it, and I do know everybody on planet Earth pretty much that's a fan of rock and metal and even just music would love to see them do it. How great would that be? But we'll see. I would love it. I hope it happens, but I remain skeptical, sadly.
You're not holding your breath is what you're saying.
No, not at all. Well, we'll see, because I do know they would love to play the Super Bowl, so we'll see.
It would be a very nice springboard into the Sphere. Make for a nice tidy year for them.
Right? Yeah. Like I said, it's not for them not wanting to do it. It's just the particulars of who's booking it, and also just the way the NFL does it. But you never know. Things can change, and there might be like, hey, we've done hip hop and all the pop for all these years. Let's spin it around. Because Metallica, I mean, I remember talking to Lars when I first saw them on this run, and he was saying they never sold this many tickets. In a weekend, they're saying 140,000 tickets. I mean, they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest band on the world right now, or artist in the world.
Yeah, I've seen this tour maybe 6 cities now, and it's always a great show. But then it's so funny, I was at Back to the Beginning in Birmingham, and they played like a 40-minute set, and they didn't have it. They weren't in the round. They didn't have all the production stuff. It was just 4 guys on the stage. And even though there were 40,000 people there or whatever it was, it actually felt like a really stripped down Metallica show.
Yeah, well, it is, right? Crazy they did Johnny Blade, by the way. That's a very Metallica thing to do, is just pull out a song from out of nowhere. I was watching it at home, and I was with some friends of mine, and we're all kind of like, what song is this? And then I realized about a minute and a half in, oh my God, that's Johnny Blade.
Yeah.
Never Say Die. That was insane.
They were great. They were absolutely perfect.
They're never not great, that's for sure. Well, dude, thank you again for doing this. Much appreciated. Yeah. It's always fun having you on, and I love to hear your passion for music and certainly for Metallica.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll wait for the call for round 3.
That's right. No worries. We'll get there.
Cool, man.
That'll do it. That was a fun one. Huge thanks to Mr. Chris Santos again for coming on and talking Metallica. Metallica's incredible producer, Greg Fidleman, who I've known for a long time. Great guy, and so happy that he came in and talked about his stuff. Martin Popoff, of course, Lizzie Borden for our theme song, and the producer who keeps this whole thing going, Mr. Christian Blatt. And we will see you guys next episode.
Disappear like man was never here.